You may have noted the smoldering ScarJo-shaped crater left by the bombing of Black Widow. Sorry. African-American Widow. You may have also noted, with no small amount of laughter-induced hernia complications, the post-collapse lawsuit Scarlett Johansson filed at Disney 15 seconds after all the dust and dog shit settled. But enough about her performance in the Black Dahlia. See, turns out all this releasing digitally dog shit, you know the stuff I said at the beginning of these lockdowns was gonna raw dog the damn industry, whether they were willing or Weinstein? Yeah. Turns out she and a shitload of other actors, producers, and preemies who all depend on theatrical release residuals all agree with a handsome devil in aviator sunglasses. Fucking Stallone. But like Tarangale out of the Queensboro Bridge, it ain't the method of achieving release here that actually matters. I said in a rant all the way back in 2017 called Will Comic Films Hit the Wall that Hollywood trends rise and they fucking fall. That these trends, or at least the permutations within said trends, tend to come and go in 10-year increments. And as of this recording, well, westerns like The Rifleman and Rawhide reigned throughout the 60s and 70s, but motherfucking evaporated by the 80s. Sci-fi, 80s fantasy, disaster flicks, you name it, like a Sony camcorder from Bizarro World, it invariably lasted between 10 and 20 years, and it must be said, they were rarely relevant for more than a mere decade. And don't look up, motherfuckers, but it's been about 9 years already. Not that I blame them for fleecing us till we fucking bleat. I mean, after superhero movies, what the fuck does Hollywood have? A Scarface prequel called fucking Face? To use an example, film noir, one of my favorite genres, began in the 40s, peaked in 1950. By 1960, you'd see more snuff films released theatrically than film fucking noir. I tend to block it out in the following phases. 1. The nascent phase, wherein the genre's still beginning to coalesce. You have a fair few hits here, but there ain't too many mouths on the money tit because it's still ill-defined and it's still unproven. Film noir experienced this in the 30s as crime films gradually melded with expressionistic horror filming techniques and ultimately French romanticism. Add in adaptations of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett detective pulp novels. Voila! By 1940, it's a bouncing baby film genre. Superhero films had this phase in the 90s and early aughts with the likes of Burton Batman, X-Men, Spider-Man, and more. But in 2008, a single film, Iron Man, flipped the fucking script, which brings me to phase number 2, the golden years. All the great film genres experience this, and it's how most of the money gets printed in Tinseltown. When the public wanted extravagant musicals, Hollywood gave us more Judy Garland than a gay dude's DVD collection. When westerns ruled the world, John Wayne was the name on everybody's lips, and Avengers is the icon of its epoch, which is why I predicted in 2019 that Avengers Endgame would prove a prophetic title for the genre at large. What I couldn't have foreseen at the time was the inbound bullshit from Washington, resultant lockdowns, and disintegration of the distribution model of Hollywood at large. But nearly 2 years in, the first major Marvel flop under their belt, and a slate of also-rans like The Inhumans and Shang-fucking-Chi making the crowd go mild, it may be time for folks to admit the golden years done come and gone. Thank you for being a friend. Which isn't to say it's all bad news, because next is number 3, deconstruction. It's a tale as old as our Alzheimer's afflicted president. Every time a genre works up a lather, directors and ultimately audiences get bored of that bullshit and demand something different, which is creative's cue to repackage, reboot, and reimagine the original concept, often with cringy incumbent political messages attached. In short, to put a shiny new wrapping paper to distract you from the fact that you just got your ass re-gifted. Wondering why whammon folk and pinko politics are festooned across the screen like arcs of Weinstein spunk across Reese Witherspoon's T-zone? Yes, their hatred of Trump is partly to blame, but the perfect storm was forming before he was even a fucking politician. Fact is, superheroes were getting old, and the only way to cultivate the illusion of complexity in the town with the depth of Thumbelina's training bra was to wedge some social messages into that shit. Look, I love me some spaghetti westerns, but as the Zapata western phenomenon of the late 60s proves, the deconstruction phase has a way of degenerating into outright pinko propaganda, whether the main character's in a cape or cowboy hat. Superheroes hit that phase some time ago, I'd argue, with films like Joker, Brightburn, Logan, hell, even but fucking Birdman deconstructing the superhero sandwich, putting it all back together and calling it a fucking pizzone. There's still money to be made in this phase. Audiences fired their cash at Joker from a fucking cannon, but by this point in the genre's lifespan, sadly, it's all building to a brick wall. Number 4, the decline. Death comes to all genres, folks. Except pop rap. We're stuck with that bullshit till somebody can find something requiring even less talent. A few prominent bombs in, it's obvious where shit is headed. And over a 5-year fucking period or so, pictures are pinched out on the cheap or simply scraped off the slate to purge their upcoming picture projects while the studios look for the next carcass to plunder. Film noir experienced this phenomenon after 1955. Westerns after 1970. And with a superhero genre that stirred in the early aughts and flowered in 2010, it does seem suspiciously apropos that 2020 would wind up being the official termination date. Which begs the obvious question: what becomes of Batman and the boys after they lose their meal ticket? And fortunately, here history is also an able guidepost. If prior trends are any indication, we've probably got another 5 to 10 years of successful but not so successful superhero flicks on the fucking horizon, followed by a gradual backslide into irate gamer irrelevance, much like the movie industry at large at this rate. And what replaces it? Oh, friends, countrymen, sexless irrelevancies who only subscribe to downvote. That's the best fucking part. Are you primed? Are you lubed? Are you ready? Remakes. No! Your favorite, my favorite, feckless, worthless, witless fucking remakes of all your favorite properties, ladled with a wondrous veneer of utterly shit CGI instead of the infinitely more convincing practical effects of the 80s. You can scream, you can shout, you can shake it all about, but believe me, Razor Force, when I say it is coming. Like Louis C.K. into an office fern, it's coming! Worse still, as streaming services subsume our property rights one cringy PC revision at a time, from the removal of Michael Jackson from The Simpsons to Peacock's complete censorship of D-Generation X footage from the WWE Network, all those cumbersome physical optical media discs you thought you'd never need again. Turns out you did, dipshits! And before you say it, sail the high seas all you like. Most of that shit is ripped from the streaming versions anyways. Youch! Better find a fucking thrift store. But whether it happens this year, next year, or next decade, all things pass, and thus I must fondly eulogize the medium at large. Rip in peace, superheroes. At first we hardly knew ye, and now we hardly watch ye. And believe it or not, for all their proselytism and antagonism of their audience, I'm not completely awash in schadenfreude here. Look, as a lifelong geek, it was nice to live in a time when Iron Man was finally a household name. But now it's time to go back to a time when Iron Woman was a command. I'm Razor Fist. God fucking speed. Fire!